Yo, this is Trav with Trav Sports Bag. I'm back at it again today, but this time it's live. No editing needed. And as you saw in the thumbnail, we want to talk about those Jaguars. Trav Sports Bag, as you probably know by now, we're talking sports. Most of the sports that you're interested in. This segment here for Trav Sports Bag is What's Up NFL? And you saw the thumbnail, so we're going to talk about those Jaguars. So that's what's coming up on Trav Sports Bag, along with Scott the G. If you haven't seen him before, you can check out my old school basketball show just from last year. So it isn't necessary. Actually, this year, it wasn't that old. But anyway, we'll get back at you right after this. That's right. Travis, back with you on the set. Scott the G is here with me, and we're going to talk a little bit about these Jaguars. The reason why I chose to talk about the Jaguars right now, because they're one of the bigger stories in the NFL. Last season, they just won 3 games. They ended the season with a big bang, beating the Indianapolis Colts, who had not beaten the Jaguars in Jacksonville since 2014. Well, they did a little bit of that 2 weeks ago or last week, because this past Sunday, they went out west and broke their 18-game road losing streak, that is, against the San Diego Chargers, who are expected to go to the playoffs. Scott the G is a native Jacksonvillian. Scott the G is a Jaguar fan, along with something called the Gators as well. That's why he's here. We bring in normal people, so if you want to join this live broadcast, you can join us whenever you want. We'll comment on you. If you comment on us, just watch the show. And when you do, make sure you also subscribe to the channel. So, Scott, we're here. The Jaguars are 2-1. They weren't expected to be 2-1. In fact, they were expected to probably win 3 games. They may do just that this Sunday if they beat the Philadelphia Eagles, which is a huge task. They're undefeated as well. The Jaguars take their show on the road, bringing their new wares.
The Eagles are tough, man. The Eagles are tough on both sides of the ball. It's going to be tough. But, yeah, I thought, at best this was like a 500 team for this year because they're still growing. Trevor Lawrence is young. They've got a lot of new players, a brand new coaching regime, a lot of stuff. You figure there's got to be a growth pattern. They've got to learn to, integrate and work together. But, what we saw in this game was, you're right. I mean, going out in the West Coast the last few years, other than 2017, you just figure that's a loss when you're with the Jags and you're going to the West Coast. But they really strongly controlled the game. And Trevor Lawrence, he played up to the expectations that Jacksonville has had since he was drafted, in the first round, first pick.
Well, the Jaguars this offseason, Shad Khan, their owner, he meant business. He went straight in there. He spent more money than anybody else in free agency. In fact, he set a record, $175.3 million in guaranteed contracts. He overpaid for some players. Christian Kirk is one of those players, but so far, Christian Kirk has been one of those receivers that has been making the touchdowns for the 6 touchdowns that Trevor Lawrence has thrown so far. The Jaguars have been looking very good offensively, and I think it has a lot to do with their running back situation. James Robinson is back. He can run between the tackles. He has the speed to get to the outside. But Travis Etienne, coming back from injury last season, misses his entire rookie year to come back this year to be that threat, to be that teammate that Trevor Lawrence had when he was at Clemson, when they won a national championship together, beating Alabama. That familiarity and that dynamic play that he could bring, especially catching out of the backfield, has been on display to some degrees. I think it's going to get a lot better, but right now, he's very solid.
Yeah, and it's great to see because obviously you draft this guy high. He's out all of last year. Of course, the biggest surprise is James Robinson, undrafted. And I heard, how they ended up getting him. Tony Khan, Shad's son, He has like an analytics team, and they look for guys specifically that don't get drafted. And they're like, who can we get after the draft? And the analytics led them to James Robinson. And I'm sure they did more than just look at the numbers. And just what a spectacular player he has turned out to be, even though, last year, I think it was just 9 months ago, he blows his Achilles back.
Yes.
No one expects him back this soon. And the guy is just killing it. Luckily, I've got him on my fantasy team. But, they're on 4th and 1. 4th and 1. All he needs 1 yard. The guy goes for 50. He blows it up. So it's really, really exciting to see him, to see a good, solid running game between both of them. And, they're passing the ball a little bit to them, to each of them. And Etienne, looks really good and shifty as well. And it's really a nice 1-2 combo.
Yeah, with James Robinson on that play on 4th and 1, he got the ball because they stacked the line. They was expecting one thing, they got another. And when you stack the line like that, once you get past that first level, there's really no one there to stop you. And he had the speed to get to the end zone. Now, going back to his Achilles injury, years ago, decades ago, that would kind of almost threaten your career. Now you have players who can come back from injury the very next season and do big things. Adrian Peterson was one of those players. He had blown out his knee. And then
He's the first, season, I remember.
He goes for over 2,000 yards. Yeah, so what ended Gale Sayers' career years ago after just a few seasons in the NFL, a knee injury that completely ended his career, is now just a kind of a run-of-the-mill injury these days. You still have to put work in. It's still a serious injury, but technology and medicine is so much further ahead than it was back then. Guys are looking at it as just a high ankle sprain, coming back the next season and putting up spectacular numbers. But the Jaguars as a whole were not expected to be doing this well. Even with money spent like Shad Khan has done, they were not expected to do this well this soon because they spent money in the past. What was it, Folks that came here from Philadelphia, and they spent a lot of money on him, got a good 4 plays out of him, and that was the end of it. So
it's easier to write a big check than it is to write a big check and get results. And I got to tell you, when they paid Christian Kirk all that money, I was like, what's going on? I was like, this guy's a
I'm still wondering
receiver.
what's going on, but he's doing it right now.
I was like, this guy's not a great receiver. I mean, he's a good receiver, but so far, I think you're getting what you paid for. I mean, they give him this $72 million contract. He was making about $2 million last year per season. Now he's making $16 million, but the dude's delivering.
And $37 million is guaranteed. Yes, he's delivering right now. Let's also remember last season, he had under 1,000 yards receiving in a 17-game season.
I don't know what they saw, but they saw something.
Obviously, that analytical thing they're doing with Shad Khan's son might be working. I don't know. They're doing it for players who are active and players who are probably just coming through the pipeline as college players. Either way, it's working so far. And we're just 3 games in, going into a whole month starting this Sunday, at least for the Jaguars. And things are kind of looking up. And by the way, as it comes to the Jaguars, that run defense, now their secondary hasn't been spectacular statistically, but they've played well there too. I think the deal is this. That big game that they gave up against the Washington Commanders when they gave up all those passing yardage, that's skewing their number right now. The running game, they've been stopping anyone. It's like reminiscent of 2005 when they had the twin towers of Marcus Stroud and John Henderson in the middle of that defense. You had Rasheed Mathis out there with 5 interceptions on the season. You had all of these very good players, and that defense didn't give up any 100-yard game for an extended period of time. In the early going, this has a bit of that makeup to it.
Yeah, well, remember 2017 when you had Calais Campbell. So they shut a lot of stuff down there. And I would say, and they did this game without Shaquille Griffin. So I thought the secondary really, did well considering they don't have their best cornerback. I thought, Tyson Campbell did a good job. Only gave up 1 reception to Mike Williams. And unfortunately, that was for a touchdown. But, 1 catch for that guy. He's 6'4". He's really tough. And I thought they controlled him really well. You've got a lot of scrappy defenders that I really like. And these guys are not starters, and they're not first-round draft picks, and they don't have the Adonis body like Josh Allen. But they just get it done. And I'm thinking of Dwayne Smoot. I'm thinking of Adam Goetsis and Rayshawn Jenkins, your guy from Miami. That guy, he's going to miss a play every once in a while. He's going to pick up a illegal use of the hands, unnecessary roughness. He's going to get one of those every once in a while. But he reminds me of Patrick Beverly, you know. He's just that tough guy. He's the enforcer you need on defense, afraid of no one. So I think he brings a lot to the mix.
Those are the growing pains that you're going to have as an NFL player. You're going to have those issues. You know what? I'll take his growing pains over those growing pains that Miami Hurricanes had against Middle Tennessee State this past week. So I'll take this any day. You know, I'm not a Jaguar fan, but I did cover the Jaguars when I was doing the media thing once upon a time. So they do hold a little place in the heart, even though those aren't the same players. It's still the same team, different owner even at the time when I was there. Wayne Weaver was the owner. But, you know, right now, you see this question on the board, if you can't see it. What is the biggest difference with the Jaguars this season as opposed to last? Besides the obvious, they have more wins already than they had last season.
Right, and let me say another guy who is really outperforming is Zay Jones. I mean, who is that guy? He played for the Bills, did nothing, went into the witness protection program for a few years, showed up here with low expectations. I know technically he was playing for the Raiders, but I mean, who knew that? And he shows up here. He gets targeted 11 times. He gets 10 receptions, had a touchdown. I mean, the guy is just really – he's getting it done. It's not his first time he's been – I mean, against the Commanders, he was really heavily favored as well. So, I mean, he's playing better than he ever had in his career. And I got to say, you know, my expectations were very low with him coming in.
And you know what? I think now I see it. Because Laquan Treadwell was someone I thought they would keep on the team because he's a big body, the consummate possession receiver with strong hands. This guy replaces him with pretty much the same dimensions, and he's actually being productive so far. He's not dropping the passes that Treadwell is dropping. He's making plays, and he's fitting right into what Trevor Lawrence is doing. He's becoming, like Zay Jones is becoming one of those players too that is a go-to guy for the moment. And now it seems like Trevor Lawrence is spreading the ball around a lot more. He's not just locking on one guy, but it looks like it because these are the guys making the catches. But he's spreading the wealth. He's showing that growth. I wonder why
a lot of growth.
People look at him right now, I think from the outside, and they tell you, you know, but he's done this. He's kind of slow with that. He's not exactly looking like this. He just won AFC Offensive Player of the Week award today. The Offensive Player of the Week award, the AFC today. So he's doing something. And on top of that, Peyton Manning threw a whole bunch of interceptions in his rookie year, but people still kept on looking at the progress and looking at the trajectory, looking at what they thought he would have been coming into the NFL. He still has greatness written all over him, even with all of those interceptions. I thought the same thing could have been said about Trevor Lawrence last season. He was looking good or looking bad and then looked good. He saw some promise, but the team around him was so bad, he wasn't going to get a fair assessment in his rookie year. At least Peyton Manning had some guys like Marvin Harrison on his team.
Yeah, he always had great players around him. He had great running backs. And I really thought Manning was overrated because, you know, the Gators beat him 4 years in a row. And there were certain years, I mean, the Gators were good back then, but there were certain years where Tennessee had a better team. The Gators still took him out. You know, Manning had those happy feet and stuff. And he obviously became, in the pros, he became eventually a very great quarterback, you know, who could stand.
College ball is so much different than pro ball. I don't really think you can make the comparison because if so, we could look at David Klinger playing at Houston and throwing all those ridiculous touchdowns against the Sorry Sisters or whatever team. And then he gets to the NFL with the Bengals. They were fooled by him, and we saw how his career ended up. We've seen a number of those kind of dudes. Joey Harrington, another one from Oregon, doing the same thing. I mean, there was a litany of guys like that. Rick Meyer, who I thought would be a good player coming out of Notre Dame, poof, be gone. And his NFL career is gone. So, but T. Martin won the championship after Peyton Manning had left, and we know that T. Martin was not an NFL long-term quality quarterback. He was a very good. In fact, I don't think he was very good. I think he was a very solid, very good, a good quarterback at Tennessee. But anyways, you know, that I put the question up already, but I'll put it up again. So, what was the biggest difference? Well, this one here. Yo, we're a live stream. We're doing it for the first time. At least I'm doing it for the first time. What's the deal? Urban Meyer, was he really that bad last year? Was there such an overhaul on this roster and so much more brought in to where his effect is completely gone and you could see the true difference? Or was he really that bad?
I would say I don't think he was that bad. I mean, whenever you lose, you're going to look like an idiot. And whenever you're losing, the weird off the field stuff, in that bar, people are going to, jump on that. If he was winning, everyone would have been like, who is that crazy girl, bothering him at the bar? But because he's losing, everyone was like, what's this guy? Why didn't he fly back with the team? Yada, yada.
But that's besides the point, because if he's losing, that's not what you're paying him to do. You brought him in to be a difference maker and to help this team win. He didn't win. He didn't win at all. He didn't even come close to really winning and really sustaining anything that meant that, you could take this and move on to the next game expecting to win games. He was just bad from the very beginning. And I think people were a little bit more sour on him because he gave Tebow a chance. And as you already know, people were upset that Tebow even got a chance, even though it wasn't that quarterback.
He didn't even make the team.
Exactly. They didn't want him to get a chance at all. See, I think Tebow should have done that earlier in his career. He should have decided to become a tight end when he was in New England because Bill Belichick would have found a way for him. Remember, he could have been out there with Gronk after Aaron Hernandez went to prison. So they could have been there together, but that's another story for another day. But Urban Meyer, I believe, was that bad a coach, and I was expecting more, believe it or not. A lot of college coaches, I mean, you can look at Nick Saban when he was at Michigan State, and he wasn't the real Nick Saban until he went to LSU, and now he's Nick Saban that we know today because he's at Alabama. So the one in Michigan State wasn't nothing special. The one at LSU was becoming special. Now the iconic Nick Saban is here now, and as an NFL coach, we already know what happened there. It's just a different breed of game.
I think the advantage of someone like Pederson over Urban Meyer is he is used to evaluating talent on the professional level versus the college level. And like you see these guys that they brought in, Kirk is looking good so far. Zay Jones obviously is looking. I would have never thought, bring in Zay Jones. So I think that ability to evaluate pro level talent is definitely a skill that I think you have to learn when you're coming from college, and something that Pederson already had.
And Foye Oluokun, the linebacker, just another one that they brought in who's doing really well. He's leading the team in tackles. He's one of the top tacklers in all the NFL right now at his linebacker spot. Who misses Miles Jack right now? Even the young guy.
Miles Jack is killing it in Pittsburgh. He's killing it in Utah,
making an interception and making plays as well. A rookie from Utah is out there playing in his first year. Typically, I don't really give a lot of too much credence because the NFL still is a huge jump from whatever college ball you're playing, whether it's the SEC and even more so for something like the MAC or Sun Belt. But when you see someone like that, when he comes into the league, you expect you're not really expecting him to do well, especially coming from Utah. It is the Pac-12, but still, you expect even the top players to go through a little bit of a growing pains and not necessarily start unless they were picked very early. He wasn't picked very early. I think he was a second-round draft pick, but he's there. And typically for a bad team, you're like, you know what? You just happen to start because their team was so bad, you're starting. No, he's playing now for a 2-1 team that looks like they have a nice little ways in front of them in which they're improving, and he's out there. He's looked like he's growing with the team. This whole team is doing well right now. Trevon Walker not getting the sacks, but he's getting a lot of pressures, and he's really in on a lot of plays right now.
Yeah. Well, let's say two advantages that the Jaguars did have in this game is the injuries, right? Bosa goes out after the first quarter, and Herbert's banged up. He was talking about some rib cartilage or something, but you could see normally that guy is just nails on. And he missed a couple of passes that I think otherwise, he probably would have made. But not taking anything away from the Jags secondary. They were solid. Even that one touchdown he threw to Mike Williams. I think that was who's the guy from Georgia? The guy's awesome. Tyson Campbell, I think it was. Right. He was right on him, but that was just a great throw.
Great throw. But you know what?
That was early. I think that was early in the game. And so I think what happened was he was hurting a little bit, and then he goes and cools off at halftime, and he was really feeling, really hurt in the second half.
But this is football. You can't go through a season or can't expect to go through a season or even a game completely unhurt or not bruised. This is what happens during the course of the game. You almost kind of sound like an Alabama fan of when Jameson didn't get injured last season, if this and that or the other, we would have won the national championship. who's going to be completely healthy by the end of the season, especially in a championship situation. No one's really that way. It's who could withstand those injuries, and with all of that depth that a team has, well, the next guy up is supposed to be able to kind of fill the gap, and there isn't supposed to be that much of a drop-off, especially on the college ranks. This is the same thing with the NFL. These are the best of the best, and of course, there's a drop-off if Herbert is not playing the way he should. But so what? Who had sympathy for the Jaguars when they had their rash of injuries on the offensive line and everywhere else? They looked at him as a 3-14 team last season, and that was it.
Yeah, and give the guy credit. I mean, he toughed it out, but he's
supposed to be your football player.
Yeah, I just thought his accuracy was a little bit off. And
the Jaguars caused it. They banged him up a little bit more, gave him a few more happy feet, gave him a few more bruises and a little bit more pain. It changed his game.
Dwayne Smoot sure did. Dwayne Smoot was like, you're going down and you're dropping the ball.
Exactly. And the Jaguars blew them out. They didn't just beat them. So with that said, Trevor Lawrence, are you buying into Trevor Lawrence, or is it still too early?
I mean, it's kind of early, but I mean, the guy had 70%. He completed over 70% of his passes, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 28 for 39. I think this is the guy they drafted, right? This is what they expected when they drafted the guy first overall. And, you didn't see it last year. And so I think we're getting used to, we've been spoiled by so many quarterbacks who are just awesome right away. I mean,
like Mac Jones coming in, right? I wanted Mac Jones for the Jets, but the Patriots ended up getting him. I mean, he's injured now with the high ankle sprain, but he showed last year.
I thought you were talking about when the Jaguars got Matt Jones from Arkansas.
No, I said Mac Jones, not Mac Sniff Jones, not him.
Yeah. Come on. You're talking about the Bowles kid.
Yeah, the Bowles kid, Mac Jones, I've watched since he was at Bowles, and I watched when he got to Alabama, and I saw when he was having his trying times during garbage time at Alabama. And then ultimately, when he got the job permanently, he turned out to be a stud and was up there for the Heisman Trophy. And he missed it. His teammate got it, but he turned out to be a solid player. And I think people still didn't buy into it because they were talking about Alabama has such great offensive linemen. He was never under duress. He has so much time to throw back there. Anyone can do that. He shows up with the Patriots last year, one of the later picks for the quarterbacks, and he does a very commendable job for Bill Belichick. And of course, Belichick knows a good quarterback when he sees it. He knows who he can nurture and what he can nurture. He kept him, made him the starter, and he did his thing. So with that said,
you had those 3 at Alabama, right? You had Hurts, you had Tua, and Mac Jones.
Yeah, yep. And now Hurts is going to make it for the Jaguars.
Right, not a school known for quarterbacks, really. I mean, who have they? I mean, since Joe Willie Namath, well, they had Stabler, they had Namath, and that's about it. I mean, AJ McCarron, he seemed decent. He was one of those quarterbacks.
I actually thought he would do well. I thought he would.
He's kind of like Brissett. He's one of those guys, good but not great. So,
yeah, Brissett, and I'm sure you'd bring him up because he's a former Gator. I mean. But you know what? Brissett has his moments because I remember just last Sunday how he started the game off and he was just throwing, completing passes and looking very well. But that's not going to be the case with him all the time. He's been a journeyman quarterback. He's kind of been the Fitzpatrick. He's been the Fitzpatrick of football right now. Or he's going to pick up from where Fitzpatrick left off, just being a journeyman and helping out and having his moments. Never looking at the Hall of Fame unless he goes with me with a ticket. But that's pretty much what it's going to be with him.
But he was solid with the Colts. He lit up the Jaguars when he was with the Colts.
Well, back then, lighting up the Jaguars wasn't exactly something no one else has done. Everyone was doing it. And last year, when you got 3 wins, and the year before that, you have 1 win. I mean, come on, you just got in line and just took a number.
He fitted in some tight windows, though, man.
He's got some tight windows. With the Jaguars, what type?
By the way, remember, I'm not just a homer. He did play at Florida, but he actually ended up graduating from NC State.
Yeah, I know. He ended up going to NC State. I remember that's that time when Florida had like a mass exodus of quarterbacks who just didn't want to be there.
Well, we brought in somebody over Brissett, and that's why.
But there was other quarterbacks who were left. What's the quarterback that ended up going to Louisiana Tech?
Yeah, that was. He got suspended for a year because
was it Will Greer also?
What's that?
Was Will Greer there?
Greer was there.
He ended up going up to West Virginia, I believe, right?
Right. Right.
And so Florida did have somewhat of a mass exodus of quarterbacks who just didn't want to be there. So I don't think it was just one quarterback in just trying to and making everyone else upset. I don't know what was going on there. We kind of see with Mullen, the way he probably was coaching, is the reason why people were leaving.
Yeah, that was a big surprise and a big disappointment with Mullen. I would guess I would say the same with Urban here. I mean, a lot of people didn't have high expectations. And, he's always been a little strange. Like when he was with Florida, he said he had some kind of heart issue. I think the dude had a panic attack. And, that doesn't sound cool to say, I had a panic attack.
Mental illness.
I had a heart thing.
Whatever mental illness or whatever comes along as soft and, in the testosterone-filled world of the NFL, there's just certain things that you probably shouldn't say, wouldn't say. I've been in a lot of NFL locker rooms. I mean, if you just go there just on a regular day when you're not even really covering a news conference, you feel the testosterone inside of a locker room. I mean, even if you're cool with a guy, if you're not cool with a guy, you just feel the testosterone inside of an NFL locker room on a regular practice day or even payday when it comes. It's just a different feel. It's just a different feel. And I can see why some people may not want to come to an NFL team, saying certain things. Oh, man, I'm having mental issues. Guys look at you kind of cockeyed. The same people will tell you, like, you know what, it's okay to be that way. But it just, it's just something they didn't. I think they're more accepting of it now than they were even back then when I was covering sports like that. But,
as soon as you say you have a heart issue, everyone backs off. Oh, dude, I hope you're okay.
Yeah, they hope you're okay, but depending on what kind of heart you're talking about, because is it the heart because you're sensitive, or is it a heart because it's an issue? Because then the team backs off.
Right.
If you got a heart issue.
As long as you say it's a physical heart, it's like, okay, I'm backing off.
Well, they'll back off, and the team eventually will find a way to back off and back out. So with that said, no team has rushed for over 100 yards against the Jaguars this year. I mentioned that a little earlier. It takes me back to 2005 when the Jaguars had that phenomenal defense. Marcus Stroud, John Henderson. And that overall defense was just really stout that time. They went 12-4 that year? 12-5 that year? 12-5. Look at me. 12-4 that year. And they went to the playoffs. They lost to the Patriots. And, this team, not so early, but, hey, they're holding their end of the bargain. And I don't believe it's because they're giving up so many yards in the air that, they don't have to run. No, most of those yards came against the Commanders. They've been locking down the running game of these teams, at least the last two they've played. They're really going to get challenged this time around with Jalen Hurts, who doesn't throw a lot of touchdowns, but he has a high percentage completion rate, and he has good receivers, a nice running back in Sanders. And I think it's going to be a good game and a tough game for the Jaguars, but I think they have a lot of inspiration and a lot of confidence coming from the West Coast, which they haven't won in so long, and then the 18-game road losing streak to come to where they're going now in Philadelphia, which is a hard place to play. But the Jaguars, they're in upset mode now. I would not be surprised. Vegas doesn't think so. 6.5-point favorites for the Philadelphia Eagles. But
I think the Chargers were like 6.5 too, weren't they?
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So I don't know if it was 6.5, but I know it was somewhere up there because they looked at the past. And the one thing about gambling, you don't want to look at the past completely. You want to look at the here and now. If you're a real gambler, you look at the here and now. You try to take your numbers and crunch your numbers and see what's good and what's working now. You don't typically like to look at trends because those things, they're good for information, but they don't always tell the tale, especially in the NFL. College, I could see that. Right. In college, some of these trends, like when Navy kept losing to Notre Dame for like 40 years, I can see why it kept happening. And then eventually they beat them. And they were just overpowered until Navy got a little better team. But anyways, I think the Jaguars have a really good chance, not just saying it because of their win. They just have a different team.
Yeah. Well, they've got the talent. I think the only question is, can they stay healthy? And, and how do they adjust, when people do get injured? And for this game, at least, they did really well because your number one cornerback is out and you still shut down one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So there's a lot to be excited about.
And there's another thing I was going to talk about in terms of the Jaguars playing the way they've played right now, and we're looking at the way the football is going on, and it's almost like resembling a bit of the college game where you're seeing a lot of upsets that you would not expect. The Miami losing to Middle Tennessee State or Texas A&M losing to Appalachian State, things we just hadn't seen. I think that has more to do with the transfer portal and the lack of chemistry and everybody moving from place to place. But I think you see some of that here in the NFL now because even the Detroit Lions were a bit formidable. They blew the game last Sunday, but they would have been 2-1 as well if they did not blow that game. The Jaguars in the AFC South, they beat Indianapolis, but they beat Indianapolis in Jacksonville. Somewhere Indianapolis hasn't won since 2014. So you kind of you don't want to look at it. Once again, it kind of goes back what I was saying. You don't want to take the trends, but they're just continuing the trend. And do they do that up there in Indianapolis? Does the team get better now moving forward? Or do they just steadily just go where they're going, and that's good enough to get to them? Because even if they don't make the playoffs this year, it's still a hell of an improvement from the 3 wins they had last season.
Yeah, well, let's say this. I mean, they didn't just beat Indianapolis. I mean, they beat the stew out of them. It was clearly one team was better than the other when you were playing Indiana. Now, a lot of that has to do with the quarterback, and they could not protect him during that game. Our defense was all over him. Are they going to get better? Have they gotten better? I don't know. And, Matt Ryan's obviously he's been a very productive quarterback over the years, but so far he hadn't been able to do that, and Indiana's defense has been vulnerable too. So I like their chances in the league.
And these are older guys now. I mean, I try to separate names from their performance from the past, because sometimes you get a little, you become biased and you get a little disillusioned by it. And it reminds me of boxing. You see a person's name. If you hear Muhammad Ali's name, you just assume that it's going to be a great fight. And then you see him fight a guy like Trevor Burbick in his last fight, and he's not even a shell of what he used to be. He's like, he should be in the morgue. He shouldn't even be in the ring. And that's the same thing I look at football. You have these players that have these names and remember them from yesteryear. And then when they go to other teams, you expect them to do a lot of what they had done. Matt Ryan was just a few quarters away from winning the Super Bowl, to now he's playing with Indianapolis, and he doesn't look anything like that. He doesn't have the weapons, first of all. But secondly, and he has a good running back in Jonathan Taylor, but nothing to it when it came to the Jaguars.
Yeah, really, really hurting on wide receivers. Everyone's getting excited about Michael Pittman, and I think there's just not a lot to get excited about there. Of course, the problem with the wide receivers, at least against the Jaguars, was we were on top of Matt Ryan the whole time. So even if he would have had Jerry Rice out there, he probably still wouldn't have won, because he was just we were just smothering him the whole game.
So in the AFC South, what is it? Which team is going to be the real threat to the Jags? Would it be Tennessee? I don't think it's going to be Indy. I think it's going to be Tennessee.
I think so. I think Tennessee too. They're showing some fight. Derrick Henry's still got some fight in him. Tannehill can get it around. He needs to start throwing it more to James Woods, who is my fantasy guy, but he's got some other, young receivers out there. And I think when it comes to Houston, obviously they've got one of the brightest up-and-coming running backs in the league in terms of Dameon Pierce, but also on my fantasy team, by the way.
Yeah,
but
there's always some ulterior motive with you.
What's that?
There's always some ulterior motive with you. There's never really just give me the answer. It's always I got him because my fantasy team needs him.
Well, he was
a championship game. It's not just this is my team. Let me just win with this Jaguar team. You're a Jaguar fan. It's your fantasy.
Well, he was. Don't forget, Pierce was a Gator too. So I'm homering in on that. He was the guy who ran that touchdown against FSU, and they tore his helmet off. And he ran for a touchdown, and the referee said, A, no touchdown because you're running without your helmet on, and B, we're going to penalize you for running without your helmet on. I was like, what about the guy who tore the helmet off? Anyway,
yeah, those are one of the college rules.
So what are you going to do?
And also in line with your fantasy football thing, does James Robinson kill the value of Travis Etienne when it comes to fantasy football? This is one of those outlier questions.
No, well, I mean, I'll tell you what, since I drafted Robinson, I don't care as much, but it's not, I think they're giving Etienne, as many at least passing opportunities as Robinson, which if you're in a full point PPR, I mean, that's definitely a good thing. But I mean, Robinson's just like you said, and there's great play calling. Let's say that about Doug Pederson. So that's 4th and 1. That takes a lot of guts to really swing for the fences like they did on that one. And it takes a guy with the speed and the toughness and the shiftiness of James Robinson to pull it off. So
yeah, but Doug Pederson he has money in the bank. This guy can kind of wing it. He could take those chances because he took a lot of chances last Sunday. And I think he's going to do a lot more of that. And I think that also helps the confidence of the team.
Yeah, well, God love him, man. Let's do more of it. As long as we can pull it off.
And that offensive line, Trevor Lawrence only sacked 2 times so far this season. The offensive line has been an Achilles heel for the Jaguars the past several years. So far, 3 games in, just 2 sacks for Trevor Lawrence. And that goes into now the next game in which they're playing against the Philadelphia Eagles up at Lincoln Financial. You have Jalen Hurts, who's thrown for a lot of yards because going back to Trevor Lawrence, just 772 yards, not a whole lot of yards, but he has a completion percentage. He only has 1 interception. That was in the first game of the season. Now you get Jalen Hurts, who only has 4 touchdowns, but he's been sacked 7 times already.
Yeah. Well, I mean, normally you look at an offensive line, when you have a lot of turnover, you have a lot of new guys in there. It takes a while to gel, and I think that's like what you're seeing in Cincinnati. But these guys, even though you got a number of new guys in there, the Jaguars have done, really well. And I would say that too about secondaries too. A lot of time you have a new secondary, it kind of takes a while for them to gel, and I think you're seeing some of that with the other teams in the NFL.
Well, the Jaguars have their work cut out for them going up to Philadelphia. I know they'll have a lot of inspiration once again. I think that they're definitely going to go up there and give their best. Once again, I'm not a Jaguar fan. I just like to see when the Jaguars are doing well. I'm a Jets fan. I got my own set of problems. So, and I want to see them do well.
Nothing but problems.
Huh?
But, and let's say this about Philly, that's a tough crowd.
The crowd is tough as a team.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. If you don't lose to the team, the crowd will take you down. They'll just put that on the scoreboard.
Yeah.
But the Jaguars, I think this is a brand new Jaguar team. I don't think it's the same old Jaguars just by the way they're playing right now. I don't think there's anything fluky about what's going on. Trevor Lawrence is continuing to make those strides. And I tell you what, I think that Travis Etienne is a huge addition, being able to catch out of the backfield. Now, he hasn't gotten the ball a whole lot, but when he's gotten it, he's moved the chains with it. I like to see him do a little better in between the tackles or even getting to the outside because he can do that. He has those little jitterbug moves. He makes that sudden cut when he does run between the tackles, and that's a very hard thing to do when you get the ball and you try to run between the tackles and not get caught up in the mess. He can make those short cuts, and he can make it like a 7-8 yard run. He's averaging over 4 yards a pop right now. And another thing, he doesn't look as big as his weight says. It says he's 5'10", 215 pounds. He looks every bit of 190 pounder.
He looks small.
He looks pretty slender.
We were talking about coming back from injuries. I mean, he had that plantar fasciitis or whatever it was, and so that's not easy to come back.
That's painful.
Yeah,
plantar fasciitis is really painful. So yeah,
you're right though. I saw him in the preseason. I was like, dude, that guy's too small. My buddy told me he was 215. We'll see.
I can't see that, man. When I saw him in person, and he just doesn't come across as that guy. I'm used to seeing guys in person and knowing that they're a big guy like Greg Jones when he came out of Florida State. You already knew what you were getting. And when I saw Greg Jones in the freaking locker room, Greg Jones was just the beast in the locker room that he was on the football field. He was like, yo, bro, why are you putting a helmet on? You could just run out there and play. But, you just see these players in person and you just kind of can tell who weighs what and who's kind of fudging it a little bit in the media guy with their weight. It looks like he's one of those guys. But you know what? He delivers, and it almost looks like he's an inch away from getting some type of a nagging injury when he breaks a run. It just looks that way to me.
Yeah, I had that watch him in the preseason. I was like, man, can this guy last? It kind of reminds me of that guy the Giants have who played for Florida. Super, super shifty guy, but he can't seem to stay healthy. So
that seems to be the case of anybody at the Giants right now. Still, Sterling just got injured. He's out for the season with a torn knee. He just can't seem to stay healthy. And now Saquon Barkley, he's always had his injuries. I've been hearing these fickle fans in New York talk about how they don't want him and they should trade him before the deadline. That's just New York fans. They're the most passionate and probably the worst, along with Philly and along with some other fair weather fans out there. But yeah, that's just what they do. And how about Foye Oluokun, linebacker for the Jaguars? He came from Yale, so he have a smart play out there. And he's leading, like I mentioned earlier, he's leading the team in tackles. He's one of the top tacklers in the NFL, and he's getting a lot of solo tackles. So it's not a bunch of assists. He's getting there. He's initiating it. He's stopping it. And, he's making it happen. So this just goes back into what the Jaguars had done in the offseason, bringing in this talent, trying to make this team better like everyone else is doing. It's just that the Jaguars have not been good at making it happen for decades now. This time around, it might be changing a little bit of that trend. I know, and I don't even think this game against the Philadelphia Eagles, a loss doesn't change how good the Jaguars may actually be. I think a win does more in terms of showing you, you know what, they may be here to stay. And now it's probably going to be between them and Tennessee for the AFC South. And you may even talk, and with the AFC South not being that competitive or, tough right now, with the Texans having their issues and Indy still trying to figure themselves out, it's just the Jaguars and Tennessee from what I see right now. And if they can handle Tennessee, at least one of the games here, it makes things a little bit more interesting.
You bet. And, Tannehill's another one of those quarterbacks who's, he stunk in Miami. He's gotten a lot better in Tennessee, but he's at that good, not great level. So, and with, they got rid of his best wide receiver. So it'll be interesting to see how he gels with, the folks they have now, including Robert Wood, who they picked up from the Chargers. So he actually did connect with them quite a bit this past week. So hopefully that's the shape of things to come. I was really worried coming into the season because of Henry's, foot injury. How's he going to do? So far, so good, but we'll see.
Well, as you can hear the music, like I said, my first live stream, we're talking about the Jaguars. This is a sports channel. Yo, Travis Sports Bag is bringing it all to you. Whether it's football, whether it's baseball, basketball, I still haven't gotten into baseball yet. But even talk like this, we're talking about the Jaguars today, maybe another team tomorrow, or maybe another team next week. We're also going to talk about a little college ball. So I'd like to thank you all for not showing up. Hopefully you'll get a chance to check out this live stream and you can make your comments and you can subscribe to the channel, do all of those things. That's going to help the channel grow a little bit more. Along with Scott the G, who was my assistant today. I'm the head coach. He's the assistant. We wrap this Jaguar game. Until next time. That's time.